Let's get one thing straight. You are not your bad habits. You are the one who developed them, and that means you have the power to break them. The first thing we've got to understand is this. Most people are trying to change their habits without even understanding why those habits exist. You don't smoke, scroll, or procrastinate just because you're lazy or weak. You do it because at some point, those habits gave you something, a sense of relief, comfort, distraction, or even control. But here's the truth. What once served you is now sabotaging you. And until you bring that pattern into the light, keep running your life in the dark. Most people want to change something about themselves. They want to stop procrastinating, quit smoking, eat healthier, sleep on time, stop reacting emotionally, spend less time on their phones, start working out consistently. But despite their desire, they often find themselves caught in a cycle, trying, failing, trying again, then giving up. Eventually, they accept the behavior as just who they are. But here's the truth. You cannot change what you do not first acknowledge. That's why awareness is always the first step. Not action, not motivation, not strategy, awareness. We live most of our lives on autopilot. Our brains are wired for efficiency, which means once a behavior is repeated enough, it gets filed away as a habit. That habit becomes a program, something you run without conscious input. Think about how you brush your teeth, check your phone, scroll social media, or snack while watching TV. These aren't choices. These are patterns you've rehearsed so many times that your brain now runs them by default. And because you're not fully conscious while doing them, it becomes nearly impossible to change them through willpower alone. That's why you need to stop and wake up. Becoming aware of your habits isn't about judgment. It's not about calling yourself lazy or weak or undisciplined. It's about becoming a student of your own behavior. You need to observe yourself like a scientist. You need to learn your triggers, your emotional states, your environment, your internal dialogues. You need to track what you do, when you do it, and why you do it. Let's say you want to stop staying up late. The habit is not just staying awake. It might be scrolling endlessly on your phone. So why do you do it? Are you escaping stress from the day? Are you avoiding tomorrow's responsibilities? You craving distraction or stimulation because your day was too rigid? Until you start asking those questions, the habit will remain a mystery. And here's the catch: you can't fight what you can't see. When you're not aware, you blame the wrong things. You say, I have no discipline, but the truth might be I keep my phone next to my bed and it's the last thing I see before I sleep. You say, I'm just a procrastinator, when in reality, I feel overwhelmed by tasks because I never break them down, so I avoid them. You label yourself by your outcomes instead of tracing the behavior back to its root. That's why awareness must be intentional. You have to slow down and start noticing. Keep a journal. Record your thoughts. Log your habits for a week without trying to change them. Just watch. Without blame, without pressure. Just study yourself. This is not a passive step. It's the most active, powerful step in the process of transformation. Because once you bring the unconscious into the conscious, you reclaim your power. Now, instead of being reactive, you can become responsive. You can start to make real choices instead of running automatic scripts. Imagine this like standing in front of a mirror for the first time after years of guessing what you look like. You finally see what you've been dealing with, not to criticize, to understand. That understanding gives you options. It gives you leverage, and leverage is everything. Once you know what triggers your habits, what fuels them, what emotional need they meet, you can begin the process of replacing, disrupting, restructuring them. You can change the cue. You can shift the reward. You can design a new pattern with intention. But it all begins with one moment, the moment you pause, look in the mirror, and tell yourself the truth. The moment you stop running from the discomfort and instead say, okay, I see it. I own it. Now let's do something about it. It doesn't matter how long you've had the habit. It doesn't matter how many times you've failed to change it before. It doesn't even matter how hopeless it feels. Because the very act of becoming aware, truly aware, means the cycle has already been broken. The loop has been exposed. The program has been interrupted. And from that place of awareness, you no longer move blindly, you move consciously, with intention, with clarity, with power. So if you want to break your bad habits, don't start by doing more. Start by becoming more aware. Because once you can see it, you can change it. Most people believe that their bad habits define them. They say things like, I've always been this way, or it's just who I am. But that belief is a misunderstanding of how habits are formed. Habits are not permanent traits, they're practiced behaviors. No one is born with the habit of procrastinating, binge watching TV, overthinking, or emotional eating. These habits are not part of your DNA. They are the result of small, repeated choices made over time. And the good news is what was learned through repetition can be unlearned the same way. The truth is your brain is incredibly adaptable. It responds to patterns. Every time you repeat a behavior, you reinforce the neural pathway associated with it. Think of it like a dirt road being traveled again and again. It eventually becomes a highway. The more you do something, the easier it becomes for your brain to automate it. That's why some habits feel effortless now. They've simply been repeated so many times that your brain files them away as default. But this also means that building new habits works the exact same way. It's not about having superhuman motivation. It's about showing up consistently until the new pattern becomes more familiar than the old one. Repetition is the secret. When someone says, I'm not a morning person, what they're really saying is, I've practiced staying up late and sleeping in for years. If someone claims I can't stay consistent at the gym, what they often mean is, I haven't made moving my body a repeated priority yet. It's not ability that shapes behavior, it's frequency. And the beautiful part of that is frequency is something you control. Mistake most people make is expecting change to feel good right away. It won't. Your brain loves familiarity. So when you begin practicing a new habit, waking up earlier, eating clean, reading every night, it feels unnatural. You might even feel resistance, discomfort, or boredom. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign your brain is adjusting. Think about when you first learned how to drive, ride a bike, or use a new software. It felt clumsy at first. You had to think about every little move, but over time, through repetition, it became automatic. The same applies to your habits. So many people give up on new routines, not because they lack potential, but because they lack patience. They expect instant transformation instead of respecting the process of rewiring their behavior. But transformation is not a one-time event. It's the outcome of showing up over and over again, even when it's boring, inconvenient, or uncomfortable. Each time you repeat the new action, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. It's like lifting weights. Your muscles don't grow the first time you train, but they do grow with consistent effort. The brain works the same way. Repetition is powerful because it creates identity. When you read every night, you start to think of yourself as someone who values learning. When you train consistently, you begin to feel like a disciplined person. You don't need to become someone new. You need to act like the version of you you're trying to grow into long enough for it to become your reality. Every repetition is a vote for that version of yourself. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep casting votes. Even if you mess up, it doesn't undo your progress. What matters more than perfection is persistence. Missing one workout doesn't make you undisciplined. Having one bad day doesn't erase a week of good ones. The moment you decide that missing one means I've failed, you stop the repetition, and that's what truly breaks the habit. The goal isn't to be flawless. The goal is to stay in motion. Small, consistent reps build powerful momentum. Here's the most important point. The habits you want to create are not distant or unreachable. They're waiting for you to practice them today, right now, not perfectly, just repeatedly. A 2-minute meditation, 1 push-up, glass of water instead of soda. These aren't small actions. They're the building blocks of change. You don't become consistent by doing big things once. You become consistent by doing small things often. So the next time you find yourself thinking, this isn't working, remind yourself repetition is working even when it's invisible. Change doesn't shout, it whispers. And over time, those whispers become your new voice, your new rhythm, your new identity. The habits you want to break were built by repetition, and the habits you want to live by will be built the same way. When most people set out to change their habits, they focus entirely on themselves, their motivation, their mindset, their discipline. Those things matter. They're only part of the story. What many fail to realize is that your environment plays a far more powerful role than you think. In fact, in many cases, it's your surroundings, not your willpower, that are silently directing your behavior. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And those systems are built into the spaces you live in, the people you interact with, and the cues all around you. Take a moment and look around at your environment, your room, your home, your workspace. Every object, every sound, every smell, every digital notification is either pulling you closer to or pushing you further away from the person you want to become. If your phone is always within reach, your attention is always at risk. If junk food is within arm's length, you're not relying on discipline, you're relying on resistance. And resistance is a terrible long-term strategy. The more you have to fight your environment, the more mental energy you drain, and that energy runs out quickly. You may believe that you simply lack self-control, but in many cases, the real issue is that you're constantly being triggered by your surroundings. Every habit is linked to a cue, a time, a location, an emotion, or a visual. Your brain associates certain places with specific behaviors. If you always watch Netflix in bed, your mind begins to associate your bed with entertainment, not rest. If you always eat snacks while working, your brain links stress or boredom with eating. You may not even be hungry, but the environment cues the behavior and your body follows. This is why changing your behavior often starts with changing your environment. You can't expect to act differently in the same space that reinforced the old you. You need to disrupt the cues, reshape the associations, and create a setting that supports your new direction. That could mean placing your phone in another room when you're working. It could mean arranging your kitchen so that healthy food is visible and accessible while unhealthy snacks are hidden or removed. It could mean setting up your workspace to feel clean, intentional, and free of distractions. These are not minor tweaks. These are structural changes that make it easier for the new behavior to win. One of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is, I'll just be stronger. But the truth is, strength is not about resistance. It's about preparation. The strongest people don't fight temptation all day. They set things up so that temptation rarely shows up. They build systems that remove the need for constant decision-making. They structure their day and space so that success becomes the default. If you want to read more, keep your book visible. If you want to exercise, set your clothes out the night before. If you want to sleep better, create a tech-free bedroom. Don't rely on memory or motivation. Design your surroundings to help you win. It's not just about physical space, it's about people too. Your environment includes the people you interact with. If you're constantly surrounded by people who reinforce the old habits, who complain, procrastinate, make excuses, distract you, then you're being pulled in the wrong direction every single day, even if subtly. The people around you influence what you believe is normal and expected. If everyone in your circle skips workouts, eats poorly, avoids discipline, you'll likely do the same. But if your circle values growth, health, and consistency, that becomes your new standard. Your digital environment matters too. What you see in your feed, what you hear in your headphones, you watch before bed, these things shape your thoughts, emotions, and ultimately your behaviors. Every day, you're being programmed by the content you consume. If you want better habits, you need better inputs. Unfollow accounts that drain you. Subscribe to things that inspire action. Curate your digital world like your real one with purpose. Changing your environment might not feel as exciting as a motivational surge or a goal-setting session, but it is far more effective. It doesn't rely on your mood. It doesn't require endless energy. It works with your brain instead of against it. Because once your environment is aligned with your goals, success stops being a struggle and starts becoming a natural outcome. You don't need to be stronger. You need to be smarter about what surrounds you. Build a world where the habits you want to build are not just possible, they're easy. Because when the environment supports the behavior, consistency becomes effortless. Once consistency kicks in, everything else changes. Behind every habit you've formed, good or bad, there is an emotional driver. People often think habits are logical decisions, but they're not. Habits are emotional solutions to emotional problems. You don't eat late at night just because you're hungry. You eat because you're stressed, bored, anxious, or in need of comfort. You don't check your phone first thing in the morning because it's important. You do it because it gives you a sense of control, stimulation, or even escape. Every habit you've developed has an emotional reward tied to it. Until you understand that emotional connection, breaking the habit will always feel like a fight. Most people focus on the action they want to stop: smoking, scrolling, overeating, procrastinating, but they overlook what that behavior is doing for them emotionally. That's the real trap, because even if a habit is destructive, it still provides relief. It still serves a purpose in the moment. You might hate how it makes you feel afterward, but in that split second, it soothes something inside you. That's why logic alone isn't enough to change. You can tell yourself, I know this is bad for me 1,000 times and still do it again. Why? Because logic doesn't override emotion. It usually comes in after the decision is made. The emotional need was already met, and now logic is just there to justify what happened. Understanding the emotional root of your habit is crucial. You need to start asking different questions. Not just, why do I do this? But what do I feel right before I do this? For example, if you find yourself constantly checking your phone when you're supposed to be working, and examine the moment right before that urge. Were you feeling overwhelmed by the task? Did you hit a mental block? Were you afraid of failing or being judged? Isn't the problem. It's the solution you've trained yourself to reach for in response to that emotional state. This insight changes everything. Because once you know what emotion is driving the behavior, you can begin to shift it. Not by trying to suppress it, but by addressing it in a healthier way. If you eat when you're anxious, ask yourself what else could soothe that anxiety. Could you take a walk, talk to someone, do deep breathing, write down your thoughts? If you procrastinate because you feel overwhelmed, maybe breaking the task into smaller pieces would make it feel manageable. The point isn't to deprive yourself. It's to replace the emotional reward with something more constructive. Because a habit can't be removed. It can only be replaced. We are emotional creatures first. Our nervous system is constantly seeking safety, certainty, and control. We feel unsafe, uncertain, or out of control. We turn to familiar habits, not because they're right, but because they're predictable. Predictability feels safe. Even when it leads to negative outcomes, your brain still prefers the comfort of the known over the risk of change. That's why so many people sabotage themselves right when things are starting to go well. Success brings unfamiliar emotions, pressure, responsibility, visibility. And unless you've developed the emotional tools to handle those feelings, you'll subconsciously retreat to your old patterns. Breaking a habit then becomes more than just a behavior shift. It becomes an emotional upgrade. You're not just removing an action, you're teaching yourself to feel differently and to respond differently under stress, boredom, fatigue, rejection, or fear. That's powerful because now you're not just trying to be better. You're developing emotional maturity. You're learning how to sit with discomfort, how to face your fears instead of avoiding them, how to meet your needs without defaulting to destruction. This takes time and it takes awareness. There's no quick fix, but there is a clear path. Become curious about your emotions. Notice your patterns. Build alternative responses. And most importantly, be compassionate with yourself in the process. You didn't develop your bad habits overnight, and you won't undo them overnight either. But each time you pause, recognize the emotional urge and choose a better response, even once. You start to rewire the link. You prove to yourself that you are not controlled by your impulses. You are capable of making conscious decisions, even in emotionally charged moments. In the end, breaking bad habits isn't about being tougher. It's about being more self-aware, emotionally honest. more willing to face your feelings instead of hiding behind behavior. And when you do that consistently, you begin to build not only better habits, but a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. One who doesn't just react, responds with intention and power. Every bad habit you have exists in a loop. It's not just something that happens. It follows a predictable pattern. There's always a cue, a behavior, and a reward. Something triggers you. You respond with a specific action, and then you feel a sense of relief, distraction, comfort, or control. This cycle repeats over and over until it becomes automatic. You no longer think about it. It just runs in the background, software running silently on your brain's operating system. If you want to break that habit, you have to break the loop. That means interrupting the pattern at the exact moment your brain expects you to follow through. You cannot change a habit you don't disrupt. Replacing or resisting alone isn't always enough. You have to interrupt. The moment you feel the familiar pull to do the thing you're trying to quit, whether it's reaching for your phone, lighting a cigarette, opening the fridge, or avoiding a task, you must create a break in the automatic response. Even a few seconds of delay can be powerful. That pause, that space between trigger and reaction, gives you the chance to regain control. That's where the shift begins. Pattern interruption works because it creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. You're introducing something unexpected into a routine, and that surprise causes your brain to snap out of autopilot. That's what you're aiming for, disrupting the mindless behavior so you can replace it with something conscious. For example, if you tend to snack when you're not hungry, try brushing your teeth. When the craving hits, that flavor in your mouth is a hard stop. It breaks the loop. If you scroll social media out of habit, switch your phone to grayscale. The visual appeal disappears. It's a jolt to your system. These aren't just hacks. They're interruptions. They work because they force your brain to pay attention. Sometimes the interruption needs to be more physical. Get up and move, stand, stretch, change rooms, take a cold shower, drop and do 10 push-ups. Whatever shakes you out of the mental trance. The movement interrupts the neural pathway. It breaks the rhythm your brain is used to and sends a message that something different is happening here. You don't always need a perfect replacement habit immediately. Sometimes the win is in the interruption itself. Just not doing the thing is a success. Every time you interrupt the loop, even without a full replacement, you weaken the old connection. This isn't always easy, especially in the beginning. The pattern feels strong. Your brain will resist. You'll feel a magnetic pull to continue the habit because that path is well worn. But remember, the brain is plastic. It rewires itself through use. Each time you interrupt the old behavior, you begin to form a new connection. It might be weak at first, but with repetition, it strengthens. And over time, the old loop loses its grip. One of the most effective ways to make these interruptions work is to prepare for them. Know your triggers. If you always binge, watch when you're alone at night. Plan an alternate activity for that time. If you procrastinate when faced with big tasks, break them down beforehand so you have something manageable to focus on. Don't wait until you're deep in the urge to decide what to do. Have a go to strategy. That preparation can be the difference between falling back into the habit or interrupting it in time. There will be moments when your interruption doesn't work. You fall into the old habit anyway. That's not failure, it's feedback. Learn from it. Ask, what was the trigger? What did I feel? What could I have done differently? This level of reflection strengthens your awareness and improves your ability to interrupt the loop next time. Don't aim for perfection, aim for progress. Even one successful interruption is proof that the cycle can be broken. Key is to become the observer of your patterns and the disruptor of your defaults. You are not your habits. You are the one who can interrupt them. You have far more power than you give yourself credit for. The moment you pause, the moment you break the rhythm, you reclaim authority over your choices. You move from being reactive to being intentional. You go from repeating the past to creating a different future. Your brain is constantly learning. Every time you interrupt the pattern, it learns that something new is possible. And eventually, the new behavior becomes your new habit, not because you forced it, because you trained for it, step by step, interruption by interruption. Most people rely on willpower to break their bad habits. They tell themselves things like, I just need to try harder, or I need more self-discipline. And for a little while, that might work. They resist temptation, push through discomfort, and keep themselves on track. But then something happens, they get tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, and the old habit comes rushing back. Not because they're weak, but because willpower is a limited resource. You can't depend on it forever. What actually drives long-term change isn't willpower, it's identity. You act in alignment with the person you believe you are. Behavior follows belief. If you see yourself as a smoker trying to quit, you're fighting against your identity every single day. If you believe you're a disorganized person trying to be productive, your brain will constantly resist routines and systems because they don't match how you see yourself. This internal conflict creates friction. It feels like pushing a boulder uphill. You might make some progress, but the moment you're not paying attention, the boulder rolls right back down. That's what happens when you try to change your actions without changing your identity. But when your identity changes, when you become the kind of person who doesn't do the habit you're trying to break, the resistance fades. It doesn't mean there's no effort, but the effort becomes natural instead of forced. You're no longer pretending. You're simply acting like the person you already believe yourself to be. This is why the most powerful way to change a habit is to stop asking, what do I want to do? And start asking, who do I want to be? Because once you answer that question with clarity, your behavior starts to shift automatically. If you decide, I am a healthy person, you begin making choices that support that identity. You start eating differently, moving more, sleeping better, not because you're forcing yourself to, but because those behaviors are now part of how you see yourself. You can't fake this. It has to be real. But the good news is identity isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, and you build it through repeated action. Every time you show up in a new way, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. The first time you go to the gym, read instead of scroll, meditate instead of stress out. You've taken a step toward reinforcing a new identity. Each repetition is a reminder. This is who I am now. This is not about perfection. You will slip. You will have days where you fall back into old habits. But the question isn't whether you failed. The question is whether that action reflects who you really are anymore. Healthy person might eat junk food once in a while, but they don't live on it. A focused person might procrastinate for an hour, but they won't waste their whole week. When your identity has truly shifted, even your missteps don't feel like home anymore. They feel out of place. That discomfort drives you back on track, not because of guilt, but because the old behavior no longer fits the story you're telling yourself about who you are. So how do you shift identity? You start small. You don't need to wake up tomorrow and say, I'm a whole new person. You simply start behaving like the person you want to become in tiny, consistent ways. A 5-minute workout, 1 page of a book, turning off notifications, saying no to one impulse. These may seem insignificant in the moment, but they're not. They're signals. They're proof to yourself that change is happening. Over time, these moments compound. They add up. They slowly begin to shift the way you see yourself. This is why self-talk matters. What you say to yourself, even casually, is shaping your beliefs. Stop saying, I'm terrible at this, or I always mess up, or I can't change. Your brain is listening. Instead, speak in alignment with the identity you're building, even if you're not there yet. Say, the kind of person who follows through. Say, I'm someone who respects my time. Say, I'm learning to live with more discipline. These aren't just affirmations, they're directions. You are telling your mind where to go. Your actions will follow. Long-term change isn't about grinding through every day with raw effort. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally does the things you once had to force. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it becomes easier. Because once you've truly changed how you see yourself, everything else begins to align. So stop trying to change the behavior alone. Start changing the identity behind the behavior. Because when you shift who you are, you won't need as much willpower to act accordingly. You'll simply be acting like you. And that is the most powerful transformation of all.